Welcome again to Mark Speaks. You know how I do, y'all. I'm always cooking these books with a whole new meaning and bringing to you the data and the info that I find. Now, in my last video, I talked about cleansing ourselves of negative thinking and negative thoughts. These self-sabotaging thoughts that we harbor and harvest in our cognitive mind. Now, I want to talk about it. I touched on it in my last video, but I really feel I didn't do it justice. So I really want to kind of like dig deep, sink my teeth in a little deeper into this idea. Listen to this. Biologically, we inherit traits from our parents. That's a given, no brainer. We know that, right? Your height, your hair color, hair texture, freckles, dimples, whatever. All these are called phenotypes. These are our physical traits that we inherit from our parents. Our parents inherit their traits from their parents, and their parents inherit their traits from their parents, and the saga continues generationally. We understand that. That's easy. Easy peasy, nice and easy, right? What's interesting is there's something called dominant traits, and there's something called recessive. Now, a dominant trait is a trait that will always show up in an offspring, right? You have a dominant and a recessive. The only way the recessive shows up is if the offspring receives two recessive alleles. Alleles are copies of a gene. A gene produces two copies of itself called alleles. The only way my daughter receives a recessive gene that I might be carrying is if she gets a recessive gene from her mom. So if the child receives two recessive genes, that gene is going to be expressed. Because two alleles are competing for expression, right? Two alleles are competing to express itself in one species. So I have a daughter. If I contribute a dominant gene, my wife contributes a recessive gene, the dominant gene wins expression. It gets to express its trait in my daughter. Vice versa. So that's the general, very basic, very elementary, nothing deep, very simple concept. Everyone can get that. I use that because I'm segueing into something, so bear with me. So we understand that genetically we are products, right? We are products, we are protein products of our forefathers, of our ancestors. Contemporarily, we are products of our moms and our dads. That's contemporary, today's time, right? But having this historical context of generational inheritance from a biological standpoint now allows me to segue into the psychological standpoint. A lot of your thinking, a lot of your thought patterns, a lot of your self-sabotaging beliefs that you have about yourself are a direct inheritance of your parents. And it is a direct inheritance of their parents. And it is a direct inheritance of their parents. Now we're in your great-great-grandparents' state. I think you see where I'm going. So in order for us to cleanse these thoughts, we must first understand where they have their inception. A lot of these thoughts have their inception deeply grounded and rooted in our lineage, in our genealogy. Your great-great-grandfather hated himself, right? Because he hated himself, he passed on that dominant gene of self-hate to his children, and his children pass it on to their children. And again, you guys see where I'm going. It ends up in you, the end result or the end product, the end protein product, right? Because we're all protein products. So in order for us to really, but I want to make a quick distinction. So we have the historical genealogical lineage of inherited thinking, self-sabotaging, inherited self-hate, inherited self-fear and self-loathing, inherited self-doubt, inherited low self-esteem, inherited lack of self-confidence. We can see this, right? We can see this, looking at it from through the biological lens. However, put like this, I'm in finance, right? And my clients send me money. I invested in the stocks for them, right? When I invest, let's say that the account sits there for a year or two or whatever, there's something called a dividend. When that dividend is paid into the account, let's say the client invests, let's keep everything simple. Simplicity is the best way to go. a dollar. He invests a dollar. He's getting 10%, right? So it's 10 cent on 10% on a dollar is what, 10 cents? Okay, so he's getting the 10%. Every month, that dollar, that interest, the dividend, is added into the account. And we're going to keep everything simple. So it's called what's called, let's say a year, we look back at it, 2 years, 3 years, it's called compounded. The growth in the account, which is called the appreciation, the account appreciated by whatever, we're going to keep it simple. I don't want to confuse anyone. Once the account begins to grow, all of the additional income, whether it's 20 cents, 30 cents, 40 cents, doesn't matter. The additional income is called compounded interest. Compounded interest. Keep that in mind. I'm going to segue into my message here. The reason why I say that is this. If your great grandparents or your grandparents or your parents imbibed, I like to use the word imbibed, if they imbibed a thought pattern in you, right, and you inherited this thought pattern, if your great grandparents or your grandparents imbibed a certain thinking in your grandmother, and your grandmother imbibed or inoculated that thinking in your mother, and your mother inculcated that thinking in you, that's what's called compounded interest. I think you guys see where I'm going with this, right? The thought patterns that you have compounded. No, that's a little off. I'm not going to start this one over because it's a good one. I started over a few ones before because I messed up. I'm going to keep this one going because it's a real good one, y'all. Bear with me because it's some heavy stuff. No, let me say that over. The compounded aspect is this. You inherited all these self-loathing and self-hate thoughts about yourself from your parents. Now you're dating people. People are rejecting you. Your heart's getting broken. You probably got fired from a job. You lost This is people who are living, by the way. So if you're living, anything I'm saying right now, you should have went through. We all went through something. People are living. We're living, right? You had heartbreaks. You had failures. You had losses, whatever. The self-hate that you originally had from your parents is the original investment. Everything that you're encountering in life, which we all are encountering, it's life, y'all, is the compounded interest. You see where I'm going now? So you already inherited the self-loathing and self-hate, right? Now that self-loathing and self-hate is being aided, abetted, and assisted by your experiences. Because now your experiences is you probably got lost for a job. You probably didn't get hired for a job, excuse me, or lost a job. Or you lost a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or someone broke your heart. Life happens to you. When life happens to you, because you have the original investment, right? The original investment had its inception in your great-great-grandpappy, right? That original investment is now being, all the additional self-hate, self-doubt, low self-esteem, all these other self-deprecation or self-deprecating ideologies that you're holding is the compounded interest, is the appreciated value of your account. I hope that makes sense. I hope I tied it in right for you guys. So you can really, I like to be as vivid, lucid as possible so that you can really grasp. There's no lack of comprehension of what's being conveyed, okay? It is vitally important that you understand an investment has been made into your psychological depository box. And that investment was made by great-great-great-grandparents. And the experiences you are having today are compounding, right? They are compounding, which is, we just explained. The compounding is the appreciation of the interest on your original investment. The original investment by your granddaddy, now today, you have a whole plethora of self-hate because it has compounded over the years by a series of different events that you has personally experienced in your life. Now, understanding, having this information is the first step to self-re-engineering. Right. It's the first step to be able to reverse the curse and self-re-engineer. Because when you understand this now, this is vitally important as well. You are not, you do not consciously hate yourself. You do not consciously despise. You do not consciously self-sabotage. You do not consciously hold these thoughts that had their inception in your great-grandparents. You do not consciously do none of this. Here's why. Your consciousness accounts for about maybe 8 or 9% of all of your actions. Research and study has shown that 90, maybe 92, 95, some will say even 95% of your actions is governed by the subconscious mind. So the investment that your great-great-great-grandparents made of self-loathing, self-hate, etc., that investment was made into the subconscious depository account. It was not made in the consciousness account. It was made in the subconscious depository account. Because the subconscious is what's responsible for 95, maybe even more, of your actions. So most of the things we do, our behavior, our actions, our patterns, are governed, regulated, modified by your subconscious thinking. So to really cleanse the mind of these negative inducers, right? We have to first come into this recognition of where they had their inception. Inception means birth, their origin. When we can understand that it wasn't your fault, right? Now you start to get a little bit of freedom. You realize it wasn't your fault, right? For the self-loathing or the self-sabotaging. And this is on a deep level. It's not your fault on a deep level. On a superficial level it is, but on a deep level it isn't. When you start to understand that, then you can start the process of self-healing. And some practical advice, number one thing, remember when we were kids, I don't know if you remember this, but I was in school, whenever I cursed, they would have me write, I will not curse, like a million times on the blackboard. I'm sure we remember this. The reason why teachers had us write that, I will not this, I will not that, because they themselves, adults at the time, understood the power of our subconscious thinking and our subconscious mind. And they understood the process of inoculation or inculcation. They both pretty much mean the same thing, which is a repeating of of anything one wants to learn, or an iteration. An iteration is just a constant repetitiveness, repeating something. They understood the concept of the more you repeat something, the more it gets wedged deep in the subconscious. The more it gets wedged deep in your subconscious, as I noted before, your subconscious controls most of your actions. The more it gets wedged in your subconscious, you no longer have to think about how to think positive or how to have a positive psychological atmosphere, because your subconscious naturally churns that out. It churns that out, that positive mindset or the positive atmosphere of your psychological environment or psychological culture or media. It's so, again, there is no silver bullet. There is no pop it in the microwave and put it for, a couple of minutes and it pops out. There is no quick fix here. As I made mention, this has deep roots in generations beyond you, ancestors, forefathers. It's bigger than you. So because it is so deeply rooted, it requires a lot of, it's a feat, right? It's an incredible feat. It is a task, a very daunting task. But if you love yourself enough, you're worth the fight. You're worth the heavy lifting. So, and that's kind of like the irony, right? If you love yourself enough, but the whole concept, everything we're discussing here is about self-hate, self-loathing, self-sabotaging, the irony of it. But if you can find something in this message to make that light switch go off to where you do realize that I can, cleanse, rid myself. And last thing, the number one thing I do to rid myself of my own negative demons, meditation. Meditation. In my last video, I talked about meditation. A few videos back, I talked about meditation instead of medication. Anagrams. Anagrams are switching of letters to create different words, right? You switch letters around and you get different words. Is it a coincidence that if you drop the C in medication and put a T, you get meditation? You see? I talked about that. So meditation, in my opinion, is the number one remedy. It's the source of which we can begin the process of self-purification within our own minds. Till next time, y'all know what I'm about to go do. Cook books and bring information. Later.